So then we are back with the modern understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the Autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiach laid waste for many centuries. As we read it in Yeshayahu the prophet, it's extremely important to understand sections of Daniel and Revelation and how they relate with each other, because Galah shows the very apex of the completion of the Autumn feast found in Vaikra. And because of the trade and the first transition, we find then the new set of countries, and these countries are obviously shaping the new form of trade. So then came out in a very important article from the famous British newspaper known as the British Post. They are gathering and making plans of sending their own signal in space. So as this was then explained before many times, more than a couple of years ago, we find then the Soviet Space Agency, Roscosmos, involved in this great new plan, and we understand it's obviously is going to work. And truly, this equipment in space is related primarily with the new signal of internet trade. Now, there are sections of the trade today where then taxes are not truly charged properly. When we consider the very many virtual monetary systems in the world, and a lot of them, many countries, they cannot charge taxes. So then, what's causing then the nations becoming an uproar, as Yeshayahu the 23rd chapter explains very plainly? The nations then put to shame, and the understanding of put to shame comes from when a nation was going to war against other nation, and when these nations won the war, then the nation that lost the combat, they would march naked. It was a very popular way of shaming the other side. So then, when we transfer this understanding, the holy instructions and the prophets and the writings, there are certain ways of reading these manuscripts. So these holy manuscripts, they cannot be modernized from the culture of what was. Truly, the very original people of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, they were extinct. So the restoration period is not speaking of those remnant that obviously are going to be put back in tabernacling, but is explaining the anointing that they were very familiar with back then, but unfortunately through the centuries then they forgot. So then, very importantly, This new equipment in space is for the reasons of the signal. So as China is preparing the world for this new system, we find then many kinds of intricacies related with it. First, you already have this information regarding then the Soviet GPS system. So as far as location, they already have covered. Now the internet signal, United States unfortunately is not truly charging proper taxes. It's already showing some flaws in the ability of charging taxes via internet with monetary systems linked with the central banks and not linked with the central banks. Most not linked with the central banks. And there is truly a great failure of not receiving these monetary systems generated in the world. China, however, is mastering this ability of synchronizing each of those monetary systems into their own. That's why there is a great push for these kinds of equipment in space, and this was already explained before. So then, when the time comes, it's going to be as surprising as it was during the time of Pearl Harbor. There were evidences. We understand if we do not help Africa in organizing the continent of Africa, this country is going under. Our only link is with, at this point in time, the modernization. Now the word modernization goes as far as helping with the roads, railroads, ports, electrical systems, basic of computing, in agriculture, organizing their tax-based charges. This means modernization. You know, countries of the first world countries, unfortunately, they have got so much of modernization, they got themselves lost in the midst of it. So what is truly very evident, because of so much going on, there is not truly much they can do regarding this point. But there is a topic that these nations, even though they form the BRICS countries, there are rare materials in Africa that these countries must have in order to maintain the pace of modernization in terms of signal. Most of the Pacific is already covered, as they were disguised as television, agriculture, monitoring of sorts, topography. We understand from behind is the new signal. And this signal is already known via then Alibaba. So the Asian system, the Chinese system, has already shown itself very strong. So then the rare materials of Africa in its modernization, based from the basics of a country, truly gives us a few advantages. When those countries are modernized from help of the United States and then using our USD, our money, as a means of exchange. This is the only way to save our economy. And there is another problem. Percentages of investments. Obviously, when people are relating, purchasing, buying items sold, you have taxation. And because investments are becoming mostly online, truly doesn't take much for a person to understand making direct investments in production. Not only investing in the country or in the company, but directly on products. So then, because of the vast number of undeveloped countries, this truly is feasible. Because the money they are buying, the money they are investing, other countries are buying the products, and investment is directly related with the amount sold. In the United States, the whole situation is separated. You have areas of investment, areas of trade, areas of industry, areas this, that, and the other. China has put the whole lot together. Obviously, they are not going to reveal it. But the strangest situation is after the Pacific then is covered, then we find directly information of then the Soviet military involved with the system. Now, for those people who don't understand who was the Soviet Union, their civilian world and military world are very neat together. They have a military style of life. It's kind of already determined their identity. Because the kingdom of the north later on shall come with much equipment. It's already part of their culture, their nature. So then, because of the intricacies of investments, you have percentages varying from country and country. Now, this is when the system becomes a bit more complex. You find then a certain number being invested in certain products. These products are being purchased and invested on. Then you find dealings from country to country. If they do not have a link with the central bank, they can't charge taxes. So it's not only having a factory and producing products. It is taxation related with investments, purchasings, and also, very importantly, the line of credit. So when Daniel spoke of a knowledge shall increase, is truly this kind of knowledge he was speaking of. He was a man of trade. He was dealing with many nations on behalf of Babylon. And later on, Darius the Mede, and then Cyrus. So then when Daniel was speaking of the increasing of knowledge, he was speaking in these terms. The intricacies of these systems. And thus far, some examples are the Bitcoin, that the US had to put on hold for some time. And then they were able to make a deal with it. But how many of these systems are in the world? If we don't have the ability of linking up this system with our central bank, how can we get a hold of our economy during this electronic age? So when the president of China goes around and asking how is the infrastructure, how are the ports, airports, roads, trucks, buses, you name it, there is a reason why he's saying this. And the investments, as we know of, from times in the past, is not the same as today. So let's think of it for a moment. Other than the rare materials found in Africa, what else is out there? There is not much. Because Yeshayahu the prophet, he said very precisely, and beyond the rivers of Ethiopia there is a reason why he was speaking of those violent ones. There are wars, many kinds of wars down in the south. And obviously during this time of the restoration period, lining up the understandings of Daniel and the Gentile world in trade, you find rare materials. Now it's not only doing trade with these materials. There are other sections of investments that this country is not prepared for the system of the future. In the East, they know this. And our leaders in this country are so lavished with so many benefits, they can barely think straight. So they are going to this humdrum every day, participating in politics, and next thing you know, they launch the system, and then our system is obsolete. So this news is then recorded in the BRICS Post. There are some legal aspects that must be finalized, and the joint grouping of these systems. And then they are talking of reunions in the Soviet Union in May or the month 6th of next year. So then the period of time of a couple of years or so, the system had shown itself, was the largest IPO in this country. Now you find the Kingdom of the East then joining up in the Soviet Union. So the whole South American countries obviously are waiting for solutions from the United States. And thus far our leaders, they do not show any inclination of wise decisions. They are simply stuck in their lavish lifestyles. They don't have any more ability of dealing with so many problems in the Middle East. It's very, quite frankly, they are incompetent because of the intricacies of the sons of Ishmael. But this was already predicted. But the point is not really the incompetence that they are dealing with the wars in the East, but the inability of understanding the trade in Africa. And for so many years they despised the black brothers. And rather than helping Africa organizing itself, then we get entangled up in the Middle East. There is national security involved with, there is no question regarding it. But we are wasting resources that we should be diverting to Africa and helping the African continent organize itself and using our money as a means of exchange. But speaking of the leaders of this country is simply speaking to the wind. They're going to continue on with their lavish lifestyles as it was always. And they are not going to generate these thousands upon thousands of jobs they are promising. They are not going to do it because the economy cannot hold these number of jobs based from what this country is earning. And quite honestly, our president, he was not born in the United States. But at this point in time in the game, it's not relevant. Because there was a reason why he was able to get in the government, and there were reasons why there is this Afro-American movement. There is a reason for it. And a piece of paper does not change. So the truth is the truth. But the point is, it was extremely important these last 8 years because it has revitalized the Afro movement. And we understand Ethiopia in northern Africa is the very place where then tabernacling must be reestablished. So then, I have great news, great information. Our leaders, obviously, they are throwing mud at each other. They are living such a lavish lifestyles that they have no clue what the regular people are going through because they never lived with them. They never lived the hardships that the people endured. Even though they can watch it on television, and their very core of their being, they don't care. It doesn't pay for them to care in this kind of core level. Yeah, it's hard, but you know, God have selected them for this position. That's how they evaluate their lifestyles. They consider themselves a chosen group. And, you know, hardship is hardship, and they never went through hardships. They cannot even talk about it because they were never in the hardships before. Now, we're expecting them to resolve the problems of our country. If you take any of those people, you're going to find 9 out of 10 don't even know how to put up a fence in their backyard. Now they're talking about industry, reviving the great American industry, providing thousands upon thousands of jobs. So then, this new system relates primarily with a signal being provided, and as then the U.S. space era ended in 11, we find then this situation even more concerning because the U.S. politics has separated NASA from engaging with its Chinese counterpart due to security concerns. Security concerns, sure. It's always related with some security concern, but they never fix the economy. That's where the incompetence of our government hides behind. Everything is security. And the greatest threat of our country is our economy. That's where then the national security is at. But no, they are concerned about people, documents, non-legal people in the country, and they always hide behind those kinds of things. So the situation is not separating NASA from the Chinese counterpart. It's being more proactive and understand the way they're going to do trade via online. So rather than becoming part of it, then U.S. isolates itself. Are they thinking some sort of a God is going to save them at the end of it? He won't. Or no force is going to do it. Because the instructions are already saying step-by-step formation. Not saying that this country is not competent, that's not the point. But they are far above concerned with so much of these bad people in the East, and they forgot our economy. They don't know how to work the economy anymore. People that do not know what hardship is, they can't be in government. They don't know what people go through every day. And when you ask them, it's because they think some sort of a divine nature has separated them to do these kinds of work. So there won't be thousands upon thousands upon thousands of jobs in this country. The only great situation is helping Africa organizing itself and understanding tabernacling. Also extremely important. But since this country is not very religious anymore, so as long as we understand organizing Africa and its economy, then we should be able to organize our economy. Because these nations of the BRICS, they must have the rare materials found mostly in Africa. So then, besides these great news regarding the equipment in space, there are other talks from China and also Malaysia. Extremely important place because they produce a lot of electronics. And China is unifying many of these countries. Now they are talking of buying more ships, warships from China. They signed several trade partnerships, railways. Interesting, isn't it? First topic, railways. Energy, defense sectors. Worth of 34 times 12 digits. And this money is in USD. Interesting. Then China and Malaysia can enhance partnerships in railways, including a fast rail to strengthen the transportation of the country. So then let's hope this new election can bring some simple realities to these lavished politicians so they can understand the nation won't be able to hold for very long. So then, another place, the Philippines, a while back, they were absolutely in open, disgusting talks against the United States. It's kind of interesting the amount of these countries trying to get rid of our money. This directly represents the inability of our government to work through these details because they have no knowledge of the Holy Instructions. In Mountain View, Arkansas, was built a city underground on a mountain. So this country thought that they're going to sort of direct the world from underground. All in their minds of reptiles, they ever thought in governing the world from underground. And they say it's because of some sort of unrest in the country, then these lavish politicians would have a place for them to stay. Those places are simply caves for bats, because they are not going to govern the world from underground. They can barely govern the world from above ground. And then the money of taxpayers, thousands upon thousands, beyond imagination of counting, simply wasted. Now, speaking of people having a bit of revolt, in this mountain have 12 gates, as if they were reading some sort of a holy city of their own scripture. Now you can drive in a mountain, you find railways, you find auxiliary powered vehicles from house to house in ground, deliveries of any sort, crude, fuel, computing, everything stolen from the taxpayers. Any person can go over there in Mountain View, Arkansas, and drive in this mountain. They would be surprised. Pentagon exploded. Airplanes didn't exist. Placed a bomb in the servers. Couldn't justify the money spent. People are no longer stupid. After 4 years of fighting at the court, they were able to release 5 shots. And they were able to find out it was exploding from inside out. So maybe it's a time for this government to leave the past behind and start becoming simpler. So then, as far as the new BRICS system, as I already said before, there are reasons why they put equipment in space. As far as the politicians of these countries, simply in the past, they had reasons to do what they did. understandably. But any situation related with national security only behind bad people without organizing our economy, it shows a great deal of lack of knowledge. This moment, the problem are not the bad guys. The greatest danger in this country is the economy. Security is important? Absolutely. Not discarding the situation of security. But the government is overly concerned with it, as they are hiding behind rather than fixing the economy. Now they make these unreasonable promises of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of jobs and rescuing our industry from overseas. They are not going to rescue the industry from overseas. And there is no God coming in the future to save our country. The reasons are already given. Daniel 11 explains very precisely. Yeshayahu, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, the region of the violent ones, because they are making a trade of their own, and they are very violent with their economy because they get stolen so often. That's why they are violent, because they are being taken advantage of. Now, as easy as for this country to go there, reorganizing the Middle East and diverting the resources and help Africa organize themselves. So then, the Soviet Union. In Daniel the 11th chapter, you find later on, after the 10th verse, then the kingdom of the north coming with a great army and much equipment. So the situation is production of military equipment, inexpensive yet high quality. In China, obviously, from behind, they have requested their services so they can protect the system of China. So then, what are the chances of the economy to improve? Later on, Daniel 11 explains, in this explanation of Daniel 11, truly is not in a chronological order as we know of. Reading the holy instructions is not reading an article in a paper. I'll give you an example. Sometimes when they compare the war in the East with the Second World War, comparing the war in the East sometimes with Pearl Harbor. A person reading has to have some background. If you speak with a military historian, when you compare playing around, say, no, our economy is going to have another Pearl Harbor in our history, a person simply understands because it was a surprise releasing of bombs. Easily. So the whole instructions must have an understanding from where then Daniel is coming from. The relation is similar. And this nation went through the 29 crash of market, was able to survive 08 crash of the market. So then helping Africa is the recuperation of our economy. So then we should be very sober understanding these factors, because most of the nations of the Pacific, they are already in the hands of China. And we cannot come up with a submarine in front of a cargo ship. You can't say to the cargo ship, no, you can't go through. Earlier, China purchased a lot of tiny submarines. So, when speaking of systems and signals, there is a way of receiving a signal, there is a way of sending a signal. And there is a way also of interference. Now at this stage, since a lot of the equipment in space is related with the Pacific, when China launches their system and investments involved with it, banking involved with it, taxes involved with it, that's another point of the freighters being involved with it because of these monetary systems. So the freighters, in fact, they play a vital role in Revelation because they are directly linked with taxes. For instance, monetary systems not related with the central bank of a country. People download their information, they purchase their virtual money, and they start buying with it. They don't pay taxes when they make the transaction, but when the freighter puts the item in a box, that's when then the freighter links itself with the government system. That's when they get charged. So the government won't be able to have a very specific system for tracking of this because it's very big. So the freighters, they already have most of these systems mastered. A simple link, then they have a record of what labels they are printing. That's why then taxation is extremely important. So then, next time I'm going to evaluate more of these concerning then the relationship of the Kingdom of the East and the Soviet Union and the preparation of this new system. And then tabernacling later on, and the European nations organizing itself for the purposes of religion. I'm going to explain more of these next time, so please stay tuned, much more coming up.